third attack vector is propaganda. The United States controls the world's most powerful media, including New York Times, CNN. And as such, they can control the narrative of the world. Okay, so these are the three major attack vectors. Now they use the pawns. The pawns are weapons that they can sacrifice in order to achieve the grand strategy. And in the case of the United States, the pawn are the allies. Meaning, I hate to say this, but the UK, Europe, South Korea, and Japan. Okay? And also the entire Western Hemisphere. This is the Americans, okay? The people who are most opposed to this grand strategy of Americans are the Russians. So let's go over the Russian system. In the Russian system, the king, the political system, is an autocracy. And in autocracy, it's good because it allows for coordination. It allows for decisiveness. It allows for resolve.
Long-term thinking.
Exactly, right? That's Putin. What's bad is, if this guy dies, there's a succession crisis, right? So basically, once you topple the autocrat, then the system itself breaks down. Okay, so that's the Russian system, right? For the Russians, the grand strategy is something called the Third Rome strategy.
The Third Rome strategy?
Yes, okay? So the people in Russia believe that they are the true successors to the Roman Empire. And previously, there were two Romes. There was the first Rome, then it moved to Constantinople, and Moscow is destined to be the third Rome. And what makes Moscow interesting is that it wants to unite the entire Christian world under its leadership. The main philosopher for the Third Rome strategy is Alexander Dugin, who in 1997 wrote a book called Foundation of Geopolitics. And what he said was this. What he said that if Russia is to defeat the Americans, it needs to build alliances throughout Eurasia in order to negate American sea power and air supremacy, right? So what are the attack vectors for Russia? Okay? The first attack vector, the size of the country makes it almost invincible. So think about World War II, Operation Barbarossa. The Germans went into Russia with 6-7 million men, and it didn't get very far, okay? So the terrain is very important. The geography is very important. Then you have the Orthodox religion, which is meant to galvanize believers into supporting Russia. The third attack vector is artillery. So Russia has the best land army in the world. And we're seeing that play out in Ukraine, where a combination of Russian artillery and drones, it's devastating the Ukrainian military in Ukraine. The pawns for Russia are its soldiers. So Russia is able to sustain many casualties in its military. If you actually go and interview Russian soldiers, they are probably the bravest soldiers in the world. They are literally not afraid to die for what they believe in. Okay, so this is the Russian Third Rome strategy. You can see how it conflicts with the Americans. Okay, now we go to the Israelis. Jerusalem, the capital, it's a mixed system, meaning it's both democracy as well as a theocracy. And it's good in that the Israelis are very creative, but the fundamental weakness is the division within the society, where Tel Aviv and Jerusalem don't get along. Okay? So that is the political system of Israel. The grand strategy of Israel is called the Greater Israel Project. So the Israelis believe that the entire Middle East belongs to them, from the Nile to the Euphrates, because that's what it says in the Bible. This is what God, Yahweh, promised Abraham. So their intention is to conquer the entire Middle East, including Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Lebanon, even parts of Turkey. Now, let's look at the attack vectors for the Israelis. The first attack vector is Mossad. Mossad is the most powerful intelligence agency in the world, in that it is able to infiltrate and undermine different political systems.
And Mossad, for anyone that doesn't know, is their secret service.
Basically, yes.
Their spy system.
Second attack vector for the Israelis is the Jewish diaspora, because the Jews do business everywhere around the world. And Jewish businessmen work very closely with Mossad. And as such, they have influence in a lot of places that they shouldn't have. And the third attack vector is the Bible. Why? Because if you're a Christian, and there are many Christians who believe this, you believe that the Jews are God's chosen people. So if you look at what's happening in the Middle East, all this conflict between Israel and Palestine, a lot of this conflict is being supported politically in the United States by a group of people called Christian Zionists. And these are Christians, they're not Jews, they're Christians who believe that Israel should achieve the Greater Israel Project because this is part of God's plan. And the pawns for the Israelis are basically everyone else, okay? So a lot of the hardware underpinning the global IT infrastructure is being controlled by the Israelis. So now we go to the fourth player in this great game, and that's Iran. So Iran, it is a theocracy. People are not afraid to die for what they believe in Iran. But the weakness is that it can alienate the majority of the population because only a minority are religious zealots in Iran. Most people just want to live a decent life. So if they feel that these mullahs, the IRGC, are a threat to their peace and prosperity, then they might rise up against the mullahs.
Which is what we've seen over the years, right?
Exactly. So this is the political system of the Iranians. Their grand strategy is to unite the Muslim world under leadership. They have three attack vectors, okay? The first attack vector are their proxies. Hezbollah, Hamas, and the Houthis. Another attack vector is their asymmetrical warfare, meaning using drones and missiles to create as much economic damage as possible. Okay. And the third attack vector is their geography or the topography. They are a fortress, so it's almost impossible to invade them. Right? So that's their Shia militiamen, these religious zealots who are not afraid to die. Essentially, many of them could be suicide bombers. Okay? And so for them, this is a religious war. Okay, so now we're seeing how this entire battlefield unfolds across the world. All right, so I've mapped out the grand strategy of these different nation states who will be involved in World War III. Let's look at our present situation, okay? So what we have so far is that the Russians are occupied with their army in Ukraine. Okay, this is where their infantry, their artillery is based. At the same time, Russia has something called the Shadow Fleet. And these are about 1,000 tankers that evade sanctions around the world. Okay? And this is essentially their navy. This is the political system of the United States, which is democracy. And there are certain strengths and weaknesses to a democracy. Democracy is vibrant, it's creative, it's flexible. But its ultimate weakness is polarization, where today, the different political factions refuse to get along, and this may break out into civil war, okay? Mm-hmm. So the way you defeat the United States is not to conquer it. You can never conquer the United States. The way to defeat the United States is to force it into a civil war, which then kills the king.
To get its people to rise up against the leadership?
No, you want the Democrats and the Republicans to form different factions and fight a civil war.
Okay.
You want to create so much political polarization, the different elite factions take up arms against each other, okay? So this is the political system, okay? The democracy. Now let's look at the queen. What's the queen? The queen is what I refer to as the grand strategy of the United States. How the United States can maintain its control over the entire world. And the grand strategy, it's already outlined in the National Defense Strategy, right? Let's create Fortress America and then create chaos throughout the entire world so that we can sell everyone weapons and resources. Okay, that's the grand strategy, right? All right. Now, once you have a grand strategy, you need to implement this grand strategy. So you need attack vectors. All right, the attack vectors are the rook, the bishop, and the knight. All right, so let's go over the three major attack vectors of the United States. They are, first of all, America's technological supremacy.
So these are basically the tools that they use to attack others.
Exactly, in order to achieve their grand strategy. All right, so aero supremacy, right?
Which is the planes and stuff like that.
Then you have the US dollar, right? Because the US dollar allows you to finance everything, and everyone wants the US dollar, okay? So America is the most powerful military in the world. They have the most sophisticated air supremacy, as well as the control over the sea lanes. And it tries not to use infantry because that creates civilian casualties and that pisses everyone off in America. Okay? The Israelis are essentially a mercenary army aligned with the American Empire, doing the bidding of the American Empire. It's fighting against Lebanon as well as Iran. The Iranians, they don't have much of an air force, but they use a lot of drones to threaten. So this is where we are so far. According to the grand strategy, we can predict how they will make their moves over the next few months, over the next few years. America doesn't really care about this war in Iran because what America wants to do is force the entire world to become dependent on American weapons and resources. And you do that in two ways. The first is you control the strategic choke points of the world, and they include the Strait of Hormuz. But you also want to control the Strait of Malacca, or over here, because that blocks off East Asia. You also want to control the Panama Canal. You also want to control Greenland. You also want to control the Strait of Gibraltar. You can see the American Navy expanding outward and occupying all these maritime choke points.